This video is a guide on how to play as the Arderkang in Dark Venture Battle of the Ancients. The resurrected and reanimated Arderkang will stop at nothing to reclaim his deposed throne, utilizing his reanimated and indoctrinated minions to do so. If you haven't watched my video about the core rules on how to play Dark Venture Battle of the Ancients, be sure to click the link in the description. The Arderkang leads a faction of reanimated and genetically altered creatures. His chief advisor, Delok the Collector, has hatched a plan to reinstate the king as ruler of Dark Range, using magic and abhorrent technology with his fabricator. The Arderkang faction are by far the most complex of all, with 4 faction abilities, a dedicated faction hero, and the remaining 4 unit types each having their own special abilities. When setting up the Arderkang faction, the player will need to place the additional faction unit abilities card and Delok the Collector's hero card next to their dashboard. Firstly, let's discuss Delok the Collector, who has his own dedicated hero dashboard card, although he is never played as a standalone hero. He has one very important hero ability: build a fabricator. The fabricator is a machine used to build the Arderkang and his army of minions. To build a fabricator, spend 2 movement dice and 1 skull die. This fabricator token is placed on the same space as Delok and does not count as a unit that can take any actions. A fabricator can produce 1 unit per Arderkang turn. The Arderkang player can produce units using any combination of save cards and/or skull dice. Delok the Collector's card shows the prices for each unit. For example, I could spend 3 skull dice to fabricate this Sulk, or 2 cards and 2 skull dice to fabricate this Can's Brute. Fabricated units are placed on the same space as the fabricator, and unlike Orpal portals, this does not block future creations on the same space. Next, we'll look at the 4 faction abilities for the Arderkang units: Extraction, Revive, Temporal Shift, and Wheel of Sparks. Any unit from the Arderkang faction can attempt to extract the DNA of a captured prisoner. An Arderkang player needs to have an enemy prisoner and can spend 1 movement die to roll 2d6. On a roll of 5 or lower, nothing happens and no future attempts at extraction can be made on this prisoner. On a roll of 6 or higher, the extraction is successful. This unit is removed from the board and is placed on the Arderkang faction dashboard. The Arderkang player can now spend 6 skull dice or cards to fabricate the lowest strength and defense extracted unit. When the extracted unit is fabricated, it will have this control token underneath it to show that they are now owned by the Arderkang. These fabricated units from other factions can still utilize all of their original unit and faction abilities, which can lead to some very, very unusual and bizarre situations. The next faction ability is Revive. When an Arderkang unit is killed in combat, the player can spend 1 saved card to roll 2d6. If the roll is 8 or higher, the unit is not killed. Temporal Shift is another ability, which allows the Arderkang player to spend 2 skull dice to discard 1 saved action card, and instead draw a new action card. This can only be done once per turn. Similarly, the Wheel of Sparks ability allows the player to spend 2 movement dice to discard 1 saved item and draw a new item card. This can also only be done once per turn. Now it's time to look at each of the individual Arderkang unit abilities, which can be seen on this extra player board. The Dead Horse gains 1+ movement and allows the other units to ride on top of it, which means that that unit now moves on the horse for free. While Princess Delphine is on the board, her royal magic reduces the price of all fabrication costs by 1 to a minimum cost of 2. The Can's Brute can ambush a non-ancient enemy unit that it shares a space with. Spend 2 movement or skull dice to roll 4d6. If the total roll is 14 or higher, then this unit is immediately taken prisoner without combat. And finally, the Sulk can be made a sacrificial martyr by destroying itself on the Arderkang's turn in order to draw 2 action dice tokens or to draw 1 action card. The long dead and deposed Arderkang himself acts as this faction's ancient. In order for the Arderkang to be resurrected, the player needs to fulfill these 3 objectives in any order: by attempting to revive 2 units, by fabricating 4 units, and by drawing any 5 cards. Once these objectives are complete, the Arderkang is resurrected at a fabricator for the cost of any 6 saved cards or skull dice. The Arderkang's powerful divine ability of induction allows him to control and indoctrinate his enemies. After he defeats any enemy in battle, roll 2d6. If the roll is 10 or higher, then a control token is immediately placed beneath this defeated enemy. This unit is now controlled by the Arderkang player. The Arderkang is by far the most complex faction to choose, with a myriad of special abilities and unique units. Additionally, the Arderkang player will need to have some idea of how the other factions function in order to successfully extract and induce enemy units. The downside to this is that it's probably the least beginner-friendly faction to play as. However, once this learning curve is overcome, they are an incredibly rewarding and fun faction to play as. Fabrications, extractions, and inductions are incredibly dangerous abilities that allow the Arderkang to build up an army of mindless and obedient monstrosities. At the time of upload, the second printing of Dark Venture Battle of the Ancients and all of its expansions are available for pre-order. The link is in the description below. It's likely that these pre-orders will end soon, as manufacturing is predicted to begin later this summer. Now that we've covered all 5 factions from the base game, I'm going to be moving on to some new series on other strange, unusual, and underappreciated games on this channel. However, at a later stage I aim to come back to this series and create the faction videos for the 2 existing expansions and for the soon to be released newest expansion. Thank you again so much for watching, and see you soon.